We're excited today to have some of our successful job seekers from last year, and they're going to talk to you about their successes. We're also excited to have Ed Looby here, and he's going to speak to us, and he is with WorkSource, and this is Ed right here. So since 1985, Ed has been blazing trails for people with disabilities, whether providing opportunities for others with disabilities, helping shape legislation, activating change in his community, or simply providing a role model, pun intended, right, Ed? For others. Ed strives to wake society up to largely untapped talent pool in the disabled community and to help everyone, regardless of their ability, maneuver hurdles in the path to success, even if it requires building very long ramps to remove those hurdles. Ed has experienced all aspects of employment, having been a seasonal farm worker as an able-bodied teenager before his injury, a full-time employee after his injury, and an employer when he owned and operated the Santa Fe Centennial newspaper in the early 2000s. He understands and embodies the value of focusing on the abilities each of us bring to the table, while recognizing and minimizing the impact of the disability or inabilities each of us possess. Ed compares his personal and professional journey to a trip across the mosh pit. Please help me in welcoming Ed Looby to our and he didn't say this, but I just know this about him. If you ever work with him, he's got a great sense of humor, and he's really a big car buff. He's working on a really cool car right now.
We won't have any pictures of that.
He doesn't have any pictures of it, though. All right, here you go. Thanks, Ed.
Hi, thank you very much. I was asked to come in and talk about my experience from both sides of the employment table, having been an employee before my injury, after my injury, and actually owning a business. Before we get started, I would like to talk very briefly about changing the definition of one word right now. We're going to talk a lot about disabilities during this, and I'd like to change that word just for the length of this speech to inabilities. Now that may sound like a step backwards, but there are only a certain percentage of the people in this room that actually identify as having a disability. And I guarantee you that every single person in this room has an inability of some sort. So what it really does is level the playing field. So I'm going to ask you in just a minute to go ahead and hold your hand up. And I'm going to give you a series of tasks. If you're able to do those tasks, I'd like you to go ahead and leave your hand up in the air. And if it's something that you can't do, I'd like you to go ahead and bring your hand down. And just leave it down. Don't put it back up when I say something else that you can do, okay? So everybody, please put your hands in the air. All right, everybody who can speak a language, please go ahead and keep your hands up. All right. Are you able to operate a computer? Okay. We're losing a couple people. Are you able to work Microsoft Word? All right. Can you do AutoCAD? And if you don't know what AutoCAD is, your hand probably should come down. All right. On my hand needs to actually be in the air. Are you able to play a musical instrument? No, don't put your hand back up if you put it down already. All right. Are you able to ride a motorcycle? All right. Are you able to speak Spanish with any proficiency at all? All right. Are you able to go down a flight of steps in a wheelchair on your back wheels? There we go. All right. All right, so my hand is still in the air, so I'm going to say, are you able to get a bottle of Tabasco sauce off the top shelf of a supermarket without worrying about it breaking when it hits the floor? I can't do that. All right, is there anyone in this room who could help me out with that task of getting that Tabasco sauce off the top shelf? Very good. So we have a whole bunch of people. At least one task out of those things was something that someone in this room couldn't do. Everyone in this room has an inability of some sort. Now we could spend a whole bunch of hours sitting and talking about whether my inability to get that bottle of Tabasco sauce or your inability to ride a motorcycle is more significant. Or we could spend a little bit of time bringing our abilities together and figuring out what we can do. I suggest that the latter is far more valuable. As Diane said, I'm going to compare my life and my professional experience to a trip across the mosh pit. He's a genius, but if you not judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid. Albert Einstein. Look at our abilities, not our inabilities. For those of you who don't know what a mosh pit is that teeming throng of people in front of the stage at a concert that are pressed so hard together that you can hardly breathe, much less actually move. I don't do well with crowds. Crowds are all the same view to me. I'm in a wheelchair. When I'm in a crowd, regardless of where it's at, I see backs and backsides. The view never changes. Such is the life of a person with a disability. Every time that they try to move around, all that they generally hit are obstacles. They're very good at overcoming those obstacles, but because they encounter them every darn day. Making progress forward often is just a series of figuring out how to break down those obstacles and clear those hurdles. I was raised in a very small town in northern Montana. I was a straight A student. I was in a very tiny town, so we actually got to participate in everything in the school. I was in the band, I was in the choir, I was a basketball player, I was a football player, I was in track. Who put that up there? In the summer, I would actually work for farms, as I said before. As Diane mentioned, I would stack hay bales. I would put in irrigation dams. I would brand cattle, paint houses. Mostly not for pay, because as a farming community, we would put our hands up and volunteer to help people around the neighborhood. And basically all that we got out of it was a potluck at the end of the day. But I enjoyed the work, and it was fun. I was 16 in 1985 in September when I was riding my bicycle home from football practice, and a car hit me, going about 60 miles an hour. Broke my back between the shoulder blades. I died on the way to the hospital. Obviously that didn't stick. And that was my entry into the mosh pit. All of a sudden I had all kinds of issues. It started out with perception. The school leaders wanted me to skip that year of high school and graduate with a class behind me. I refused. I made straight A's my first semester of my junior year from the hospital. When I got home, they put me in remedial classes. I was an AP student. I took advanced English. I had advanced math. They put me in remedial courses. I fought and fought and fought until I finally got back into the classes that I should have been in, and I ended up graduating fourth in my class. Went on to college that I had to fight to get into until I saw my test scores. My first professional job after the injury was for a casino in Havre, Montana. I called Keynote numbers. And the guy who interviewed me and hired me said that he hired me specifically because he could get a tax credit. That was the only reason that he wanted to hire me. I took it because I needed the job, but it was a very demoralizing thing to tell somebody. I carried it with me for the next 30 years of my professional life. I carry it with me today. I've had other employers tell me worse things, but that's the one that's actually affected me the most. I've had an employer tell me that they would not hire me because I would be a liability. I had an employer hire me because they said I would not be able to gain the public confidence in the position that I was going into. Shortly after taking that job, I saw a group called Upward People. This is a youth group that travels around the world, and their vehicle for getting around the world is actually a musical show that they put on. I played saxophone with them, and I sang with them a little bit. So fortunate that I was able to fight through and be with that group. They said that they wanted me to be with them, but they had never had a person in a wheelchair before. And so over the next period of 4 weeks, I convinced them to let me travel with their group. I learned so much about worldview. I learned so much about my own personal strength. We traveled to 7 countries across the world. And when I got home, I decided that I was going to incorporate that into my future. I went to college. I was the first person in my family to graduate with a bachelor's degree. After I got out of college, I decided to be a news reporter. I called the newspaper in my little hometown and I said, hey, I've done my research. I know that news reporting is a needed field, that people are dropping out of it and you need reporters. I'd like to come in for an informational interview and talk with you about what I need to do to work for your paper. The guy on the phone was very excited to talk with me because I had a 4-year degree and he hadn't seen anyone but that come through his doors in a while. It's a little weekly paper. You could see the expression on his face change when he realized that the guy in the wheelchair that had come through the door was the guy he was going to interview for the job. I could see the billboard going through his head that said, you're going to have to go to meetings. You're going to have to inspire public trust. You're going to have to cover car wrecks, fires. You're not going to be able to do this job. And he politely dismissed me. So I went to the other side of town to the struggling newspaper. I talked to them, and the editor there said, sure, I like your writing. It's great. Can you start Monday? And I said, sure, that sounds great. Let's make this happen. So the next week, my first assignment was a train versus car accident. Gruesome, horrible. The lady died who was in it. I made my way to the scene in my 1937 Chevy, because I like old cars. I got out, they were just clearing a spot for Life Flight to come in. There was a car mangled and in the ditch. I'm going to keep doing that, so forgive me. Mangled and in the ditch. And I managed to make my way down into the bottom of the ditch on my back wheels on my wheelchair to get the perfect angle up through the mangled car as the helicopter was coming down to land on the dirt pad that they had prepared. And as I'm setting up the shot, I look down the road and I see the publisher of the other newspaper who had dismissed me walking down the road. And I see his eyes get as big as saucers. And he thinks to himself, this guy is going to be trouble for me. And I was. We managed to pull about half the advertiser out of his paper and put into that struggling paper on the other side of town. I beat him to every scene of the accident. I got the best photographs, and I gained a reputation. And when a conglomerate came and bought our little newspaper a year and a half later, the first person in line to bring me into the other paper in town was that publisher. And he promised me not only the news reporting position, but he said, hey, I'm going to make you a managing editor within a year. You're going to move up. You're going to get what you deserve out of this. He never did really apologize for dismissing me, but that was even better than an apology because he recognized the value that I was going to bring to his organization. This is a shot of me covering a flood downtown. Yes, that's a water level on my wheels. We went through about 10 years together, this publisher and I. We covered all kinds of awesome stuff, and we ended up winning the Texas Barbara Jordan Award for a reporter with a disability. A couple years after that, I started my own newspaper, the Santa Fe Sentinel. You were pretty close with Centennial. I appreciate that. The Santa Fe Sentinel, we opened up in a little town called Santa Fe, Texas. If anyone's ever heard of it, it's a not real nice little town. It needed a newspaper, and I really wanted to try to start my newspaper. About 4 months into it, the Governor's Committee for Disability Awareness called me up and said, hey, we'd like to do a study on your newspaper. Can you tell us about the people that you have employed? And then looking at the people that I had staffed on this newspaper, 2/3 of my people had a disability. It wasn't because I targeted people with disabilities, it was because I targeted the people who had the best experience and the best ability to do their jobs as possible. The rumors are true. They were loyal. There was less absenteeism. They were driven to put out a product that was superior to any other. We had covered not only good news, but we covered dangerous news. I expected to get shot over this article that I put in about the KKK. We tackled the issues that were difficult. I was so proud of my group as we went along through our tenure with this paper. And actually, so was the state. We got the Entrepreneurship Award for that little newspaper. So what will you get if you work with people who have these challenges that they face every day? Well, you're going to find people who have an ability to knock down roadblocks, people who have innovation. Looking at that picture, can anyone tell me what's wrong with that picture? I had to build a repair part out of water pipe. I guarantee you that is not in any repair book in the wheelchair world. I do a lot of my repairs by water pipe, and you'll see that actually on my backrest if you look at me earlier. You'll find you'll find people who can not only function in big groups, as me and my upward people playing sax, medium groups, or small groups. And most of all, you'll have to expect to be able to have your stereotypes of disabilities challenged, because you never know what they're going to present to you. This was my application for the Amazing Race. It wouldn't take me in, but I think I could have done pretty well. And yes, we have a sense of humor. The people you're going to talk to around the room are used to challenges. They're used to being undervalued. They're used to having to prove themselves above and beyond their non-disabled counterparts. If you look here, people without disabilities make this much as their median monthly earnings. It just goes down from there, all the way down to mental and emotional issues. 37% is the average that people with disabilities get paid less than their non-disabled counterparts. And it gets worse as you become more educated. High school diploma, master's degree or higher. That doesn't seem right. Okay? That doesn't seem right. This is a result of people focusing on people's inabilities rather than their abilities. The folks in this room are used to facing barriers. As ridiculous as this seems, these exist. I took this picture. A ramp leading up to a big post. Another ramp leading up to a big post. There's a few of these, so you'll have to bear with me as we go through them, because I just couldn't leave any of them out. This is a reality that we face as far as physical barriers go. Look at that one. I mean, what was the person thinking when they built that? Wow. This is another of my favorites. They put a lot of money into that. How does that even work? Yeah, fail, exactly. This one, the next one is really my favorite. I can't imagine how fast I would be going by the time I hit the bottom of that. That should be a ride that you pay money for right there. That's awesome. So you have your physical issues, and you have your cognitive issues, and you have your perceived issues. Whether it's the perception of the society that's around you, that you're not able to do the things that you know you're able to do, or perhaps even a self-perception. I am reluctant to take help, as are many people, able-bodied or not. I'm reluctant to take help. That is, and I think it's probably more prevalent for people with disabilities, because we've lost control over something in our lives, and so we want control of as much as we can possibly have, put our arms around. The question is, with my group, with the newspaper, I valued my people so much. If they ever needed an accommodation, I would jump right on it. Not only have I trained these people, not only do I know that they're great at what they do, but they're my family. I'm going to lift them up. I'm going to raise my hand and lift them up any way that I can. And monetarily, the couple $100s that I spend on their accommodation is certainly worth the $40,000 that I'm going to do to retrain them. But emotionally, it sends them the message that they're valued, that what they bring to the table means something. So you might ask yourself, you've been sitting there this whole time and said, well, Ed, how exactly does a person in a wheelchair get across the mosh pit? You have to rise above it. Okay? And this happens regardless of your gender, your race, or your age. I love this picture. I had the pleasure of meeting this guy last week. His name is Barry Long. He might actually be the original wheelchair crowd surfer, because this picture was taken a little over 20 years ago. He's an inspirational speaker, very good at what he does. He also does international marketing for real estate. He had the same condition that I had, that he really doesn't like to ask for help too much. He said this picture he loves to look back on because it's a very graphic reminder to him that in order to make it across that mosh pit, he had 100 hands lifting him up in the air. That's what we have as a community. And when I look back at the mosh pit of my life, I realize that I also had hands lifting me up. Whether I realized it or not, my parents, absolutely staunch supporters from the beginning. My struggle to make the high school work, it turns out I didn't realize it, but it wasn't me just making that fight. Miss Gail Swant, a very talented teacher in that school, was very vocal and insistent that I get put into the right classes again. I was almost suspended for correcting the remedial English teacher on what he was teaching. The admittance board for Upper People took a chance on me. Wesley Bush, my first editor, gave me that job, and he didn't give me a handout. He didn't give me a hand up. He gave me equal footing, and that was all that I wanted, a chance to prove myself and show that I could do the job that everyone else does. Even today, my team at the work that I work with right now holds me up every day. I know that they lift me up. They've got my back. And they know that I've got theirs. My hand is always in the air, keeping them lifted up as high as possible. And for the people in this room who are looking for jobs, or the employers who are looking for people to fill those jobs, realize that everybody here, all the organizers of this event, have their hands in the air to help you make that successful journey. Because when we choose to work together by valuing each other's abilities, rather than focusing on the inabilities we all have, our we becomes stronger than the me any of us possess. Thank you. So if anyone has questions for me personally or professionally, I've got a couple of seed questions prepared if you want to hear them, but don't be shy. Diane just whispered in my ear, tell me not to be shy. So don't be shy. Yes, ma'am.
How did you get the job you have? The one you have now?
How did I get the job that I have now?
Yeah.
I hoped and crossed my fingers a whole lot. I was unemployed for almost a year before I got the job that I have now. And I worked for WorkSource. So during that year, I spent a whole lot of time at WorkSource getting to know the programs and getting to know the people. I had never worked at this job before, at this type of work before, but I had a lot of transferable skills. I'm going to use some of this lingo that we use at my work. I had a lot of transferable skills that actually applied to the job. I had been a teacher. I had been a 6th grade teacher for a while. I had worked with indigent people down in Peru, building wheelchairs for kids down there who couldn't afford them themselves. I had worked as a communicator, as a written communicator, as a verbal communicator. I had been a designer, so I had some idea of how to talk with engineers when they come through the door. And the fact that I had all of that and was able to present it intelligently to the hiring managers there, I think helped secure my position with WorkSource. I've always been a people person. I've always liked helping people. It is a great feeling to be able to actually be in front of somebody who's struggling and give them a concept that will actually turn a light on in their head and make them realize that they have the ability to move forward in their struggle. This is the best job I've ever had, and they'll have to pry me out of it with a crowbar. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
What other stuff have you made other than your wheelchair?
What other stuff have I made? Wow.
Cars? What's your favorite?
I've worked on cars. I have a lot of experience working on cars. I have a 37 Chevy and a 38 pickup. I built a set of hinges that would actually pull a door out of a doorway, so that when you open a door, there's still a bit of door in the doorway and you can't get through it with the wheelchair. So I built a set of hinges that will pull a door out of a doorway. Turns out they make those commercially, but I didn't know it at the time. I built hand controls for my car. Inventing is a side effect of disability. They say that necessity is the mother of invention, and it's absolutely true. So to try to list the things that I've invented to get around that would be very lengthy. But that's probably, my favorite's probably the motorcycle. I've designed what I need to do to ride a bike, and I've been to 45 states on a bike, so yeah, really enjoy it.
So did you create that before, or like, were you creative? Like, you like making stuff before?
I love making stuff before my disability, so it was part of my personality. I grew up in a farming community and a ranching community, and farmers and ranchers tend to be able to fix their tractors with baling twine and chewing gum, and that's the kind of mindset that I was brought up in. So I was very innovative and able to create something out of nothing when I was a kid. It just compounded more when it was actually a necessity for it. Yes, sir.
Thank you for sharing your story, first off.
thank you.
Have you, or are you writing a book?
Am I writing a book?
Yes.
I'm writing 2 books, actually. I'm writing a science fiction novel, and I'm considering writing an autobiography.
You should.
That I've been told that I have an interesting life, so I'm going to consider it. A question that people ask me a lot, and I'll throw out there, is how do you ask somebody about their disability? Is it rude to ask somebody about their disability? And as you're going around and you start hiring some of these people into your business, that becomes a really real concern. I can't tell you how many people have come up to me and said, I hope it doesn't bother you, but what happened to you? Well, if it did bother me, you're too late, because I'm already bothered. My suggestion is that you don't focus on their disability to begin with. If you want to get to know this person, ask them, say, hey, I'd like to know a little bit more about you. Would you mind sharing some of your stories with me? If that person is comfortable about talking about their disability, it's going to come out in that conversation. If they're not, it's not, and probably better step away from it. When you do that, you give them an opportunity to talk about their passion, what inspires them, rather than focusing on the little narrow part of their existence that you're actually interested in. And you might actually find out that there's a lot more interesting in that person than the little bit that you're focused on. Does that make sense? Okay. No, it's not like that. Yes?
How much do you earn in your profession?
How much do I earn in my profession? Wow. I don't even know if I can say that. I make less than I've made at my topmost job. But the trade-offs that I have with being able to actually enjoy my job is worth it. At my highest pay, I made about $60,000 a year. I worked as a designer, working AutoCAD programs for Ingersoll Rand over in Kent. I was paid a little bit less than my contemporaries over there, but not 37%, thank goodness. But I also had to drive 60 miles one way to get to work. I cut my commute down coming here. I love the people I work with. I don't hate going to work in the morning. So especially you young folks from the high school, this is stuff that you'll learn about the professional world. You have to balance. Success isn't always about making the most money that you can make. Success is about also enjoying your life and being able to make a difference for other people. Does that answer your question? Okay. Anyone else? Hildo.
Ed, could I, we've talked in the past, you and I, and the thing that just caught my attention was when we hit the subject of you don't need to help, somebody wants you to help, or wants to help you. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Helping people. That is a loaded issue, isn't it? Some people get offended if they have a disability and you ask them if they can help you. I think that's a little foolish. I'm a helpful person. I hold the door for people. And that always throws them off. I'll go up and I'll hold the door, and they'll tend to go through the door and then turn around and stand in the doorway and try to hold it for me. And if I were to go through it, I'd run over them. The best route is always to ask somebody if they need help. If it's an automatic thing, if you're always going to open the door for somebody and there's a person in a wheelchair coming and you open the door for them and it's just habit, I wouldn't worry about it. If they get offended about it, then it's on them. But you never want to touch, especially a person in a wheelchair, you never want to assume and start pushing them. That is such an invasion of personal space. Even my wife does it to me every now and then, and I just bristle. I'm like, you should have said, you should have asked. And she's my wife, you know. Sometimes it's a personal challenge that I'm trying to overcome. I went up a hill in the little town in Montana where I grew up, and the hill was extremely steep and extremely long. And I didn't need to go up this hill, but I wanted to go up this hill because I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. And I got halfway up this hill, and this guy comes running out of his house, and he says, "Oh, let me help you, let me help you." And I said, no, please don't. I want to get up this hill by myself. This is an obstacle I want to overcome. He says, "Oh no, I see you struggling, I want to help you." "No, please don't." And then he came up behind me, and he put his hands on my chair, and he pushed me up the hill. And I got up to the top of the hill, and I was fuming. I was so unhappy because I made it halfway up this hill already. And I said, "I guess, thank you." And I wheeled down to the bottom of the hill, and I started over again. And he was not happy. Do ask. And if they say no, respect that. It's a personal thing. If it's something that they need help on and they still say no, and they want to bulldoze through it, let them bulldoze through it. It's their journey. Let them take that journey in the manner that makes sense to them. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
What inspired you to be a writer?
I got into writing by accident. Completely by accident. It wasn't what I wanted to do at all. I actually wanted to be an adventurer. I wanted to travel around the world and experience cultures and study religions around the world. And I was a very philosophical, spiritual person. And my vehicle for that was going to be actually writing stories about traveling around the world in a wheelchair and the different cultural aspects, the different views that people had of me as I went through. Because there are some countries in the world that believe that you're blessed to have a disability, that you're an old soul, and that you have the wisdom to be able to grow that much more from having that disability. That's not necessarily the way it is here. And I thought it would be a fascinating study around the world. So my goal, and I studied anthropology so that I could actually study all these things as I went around the world, was to do that. And I studied media, journalism as a minor so that I could actually write about it and sell my stories reliably. And then I met my first wife, and she didn't want to travel. And so my minor became my way of life, and I went into public relations and journalism as my profession. Well, it isn't really what I wanted to do, but it got me where I needed to go. So every step along the way in the journey of your life actually builds you into who you are. And I really like who I am, so I wouldn't trade it for $1 million. Yes?
Does your book have your face on it? So we can
I haven't finished the book yet.
Okay, well, will it have your face?
I don't know. I don't know if anyone actually wants to see that every day. Possibly. We'll see.
Thumbs up.
Maybe. Okay. I got your endorsement for that. Any employers have any concerns about hiring someone with disabilities? Okay. Something that I've been asked before by employers. I had actually been told by an employer that they would not hire me because if they hired me and I couldn't do the job, they wouldn't be able to fire me. That's not true. Okay. That's a misconception that's out there amongst employers. The ADA does not allow me to have a job just because I breathe. Any other questions before I hand the mic over, because I know I ran way over? Okay, I'll hand you back to Diane. Thank you very much.